So, of course, welcome everyone. It's November 22nd, and if you are watching this on the YouTube for November 22nd, or even on the November 22nd today, please do click the bell so you get notices of when we upload new videos, and like us and make a comment. We really want to be able to interact with all those who stumble across us on YouTube and something to share with us. Anyways, I think free thought in a nutshell is important. Gosh, think about how the religious supernatural believers, how do they share what they're about? Because most of them have a pretty complicated story. I often wondered, those Mormon missionaries, when they knock on it, if you don't know anything about Mormonism, oh my gosh, it's a complicated story about the lost tribes of Israel finding America, settling, and all the things that happen in the Book of Mormon. And really, the LDS Mormon Church doesn't really seem to have a whole lot to do with what goes on in the Book of Mormon. They kind of move on after that to all kinds of strange ideas about the Adam and Eve story, and how when you die you become your own God, and all kinds of things like that. Anyways, I think it's a whole lot easier to describe free thought, and that's what I'm going to attempt to do this morning. And you can let me know how well I've done during the discussion afterwards, and maybe we can all put our heads together and come up with good ways of communicating this, because the whole idea of free thought is not that it's just atheism. Atheism is a part of it, but we're a something and not just nothing. So first, free thought is just thought. But we put the free there because we want to make it clear that you should be able to think about anything at all. We don't have dogmas and doctrines about which you cannot ask questions. And what is thought? Thought is abstracting from the particular to the general. You see things happening and you think, what do we have in common? And you come up with general ideas. In science they call them laws. But then you also turn around and apply those general things to the particular again. So it's going back and forth from the particular to the general. I think we are the only animal that can do that explicitly. When animals do it, like the Pavlov's dog generalizing that anytime a bell rings, there's going to be something good to eat, it's kind of an automatic thing. So there are rules to thought. And this is one reason why we're interested in, of course, in fallacies, which are violations of those rules or errors in thinking. And all the rules of thinking come down to the idea that entities shouldn't be multiplied without necessity. That's what it means to go from the particular to the general, to try to eliminate all the particularities and get what's applicable to all the examples under consideration. Of course, we know that this is also called Occam's razor, or alternatively, the principle of parsimony, to try to do with love. Everything should be made as simple as possible, said Albert Einstein, but of course, no simpler. Maps are like this. What good would it do to have a huge piece of dirt that replicated everything about all the things on the earth? You want to be able to abstract. You want to be able to boil it down and make something simpler. And an amazing thing that we've been able to make maps of the entire world, and think about the whole history of map making and how to represent land masses and ocean, and in this case, to try to indicate something about the elevation. And you see there's political lines there of the different countries and so on. Just think of the massive amount of information that is present in something as simple as a map of the world that we take for granted. We see up on the walls in schools and other places all the time. But it's more than just that. It's more than just boiling things down. Also trying to understand things by putting together how one thing interacts with another. So here's sunrise. As we all know, we had sunrise this morning. Now this could be sunset. You might not be able to tell the difference, but in any case, we also know the sun did not rise this morning, did it? Instead, we had earth turn. It wasn't sunrise, it was earth turn. Or do we really know that? Do we really know that earth turns instead of the sun going around it? Well, this is how we make sense of it because it doesn't matter. It'll look the same regardless. You could make sense of the solar system by saying the sun goes around the earth and the other planets go around the sun and the earth together. People did believe that for a long time. The only reason we don't now is because of our conceptions of gravity and orbits, and it's much simpler, more parsimonious to make a solar system where the sun is at the center. It took people a long time to get this figured out as to why it was better to think about the sun being at the center of the system instead of the earth. So this just shows that everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler for the purpose. As you gather facts, and there's more and more particulars, like the numbers that were compiled to calculate how orbits worked, by the time Newton came along, you had to have a heliocentric solar system. Nothing else would be able to incorporate all of those additional small observations in an understandable, coherent way. You could force it to work, but you wouldn't have the simplicity of the whole system that we have. So reason and rationality justifies us in supposing we know or understand things. But now there's a serious question. What justifies reason? Why should we be rational? Most people don't bother to ask those questions because they think, well, how could you not be rational? Well, you could be just randomly rational or irrational and not pay any attention to whether you were or not. Certainly, it seems like there's a lot of people in the world who are like that. Is there anything that justifies reason other than it's kind of to live life totally without reason? About it now. There's only one thing that does not require justification in our language and our thinking. There's only one thing that's good for goodness sake, and that is the naked choice of choosing what is good. Now, there's a lot of things we think are good. This is good, that's good, this is good for that, and so on and so forth. But something that's good for its own sake, that's basically something you just have to decide. Many people decide that God is the ultimate good. That's where they get their morality from. We're not that. We get our goodness from reason. What we do is we set what is good equal to reason. And now think about this further. Everything else follows from that, including the rejection of the supernatural and any and every other departure from reason. Because once you set what is good equal to reason, then any departure from reason is not good. That's the ultimate sin. You have to maintain a reasonable attitude. And it's interesting to think that our legal system actually incorporated this very idea by applying a standard of the reasonable person. When you court, you're being sued for something, the question comes up, would a reasonable person in your situation or similar situation be expected to do? So we do have that rule. It's just not talked about that much, but this is what's going on. And it's also interesting that Immanuel Kant, the German philosopher of the 18th century, very dense reading, he's not easy to read, but he came up with this through his, what he called pure reason, that the central moral principle is to act only in accordance with that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it become a universal law. It's a kind of a clumsy way of stating it, but I think you can immediately grasp the idea that you shouldn't do anything that object to somebody else doing the same thing. Only act in a way that you would be fine with someone else doing the same thing. Why? What do you think of that? That's the principle of reciprocity. That's kind of the golden rule when it comes to how you deal with other people. But again, it has to do with reason as well. If you think reason is something that should be universally used, then that's what you have the obligation to use yourself. And that is free thought in a nutshell. I'll be interested to hear what you all think about, well, I did that, or what you think of that analysis when we get to the discussion in just a little bit. I would like to know what you would like to see in the future services events where we get together here. we're not pending for a whole hour anymore. I'd like to see one of you take this over. And in fact, one of you will need to do it next week because I will be out of town on that Sunday, the 29th. Maybe I can still sign in, depends where I'm at, but I'm not going to be at my desktop computer and be able to put up slides and presentation as I've been. November 22nd, a couple of things happened on this date that I thought were interesting. First of all, 1963, JFK's assassination in Dallas, Texas. We've talked from time to time about this briefly here. We were in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Really, it's one of those things where we all remember where we were if we were alive at the time. And also in 1967, on the same date, was Resolution 242. That was the one that followed the Six-Day War between Israel and its neighbors. And this is the date that resolution was approved by the UN Security Council. And basically the resolutions that all those countries needed to be able to be secure in their own borders really turned out to be an important framework for everything that came after, including the peace deal between Israel and Egypt. That was a landmark. And I'd like to hear what your thoughts are about some of these more recent developments in the East where additional countries have decided to establish relations with Israel. Let's review briefly our principles. Reason, of course, we were just talking about that. And the enjoyment and appreciation of life, each other, of what we have, and love, attaching, and how we go about attaching meaning, value, and purpose to life. It's not given to us. It's something that we discover on our own. Not always an easy thing to discover and learn on our own, but something we have to make an effort at, the same as we do with the rest of life. Briefly, rules about talking about politics: to remain dispassionate. If you start getting too excited, throttle it back and realize, hey, let's get a little more academic here, and realize facts are often in dispute. What you think is a fact is maybe not looked at the same way by somebody else. But we should still respect others, even though we may not respect how they're looking at something. Again, this quote from Jonathan, I've been putting it up each week because I think it is so important that if you want to change someone's mind, you have to understand what's on their mind. You have to see it from their angle. That empathy is an antidote to the idea that you're right and everybody else is wrong, or at least everyone else who doesn't think like you do. A reminder that Freethought is not free. Please do visit our website. We haven't had a lot of new material up there lately, but when I get some time, I hope to put some things up. Rusty to put things there, but we definitely do depend on your continued support. And those of you who have been sending donations, PayPal donations, and at least one or two of you have also sent checks. That is so very much appreciated, so we can continue our important work. And after all, the big thing is that we can do together what none of us can do on our own. And I'm so sad to see any of you to heck from not participating. And of course, you have to examine your own conscience as to what that is, but you know who you are and you know what you need to do. And we all do, and we all should act in a way that we would wish it to become a universal law. Help us promote your values and demonstrate your commitment by being the future that you want to see. So I don't mean to be heavy-handed about that. Just do keep in mind what's important as we go to life and have to deal with all the little ins and outs and other things that demand our attention, to remember the big picture and what holds it all together. Now, I wanted to let you know for December, I've got at least a couple of services, a couple of presentations, maybe more, that I want to deal with this idea of tribalism, the trouble with tribalism. So part 1 and part 2 for sure, maybe a 3. I'll have to. So if you have ideas about that, shoot me an email. I would love to know what you think. And with that, we can move on to Q&A discussion. I should put a slide up here that has the email address. You can reach that, but it's pastor@churchoffreethought.org, PASTO at churchoffreethought.org. I did the pastor work just because that's the function I fulfill. If one or more of you would start, I mean, it's something open to anyone, in other words. So keep that in mind. You can choose the role that you wish to play. So with that, I would just reiterate, click the bell and make a comment, like us, to our Facebook page and like us. If watching on YouTube, get connected with us. I think you'll find that we're a great group and lots to learn and cover and lots of enjoyment and appreciation as well. And with that, we'll move on to the Q&A discussion.